Remote control is the ultimate convenience technology of the modern era, as it allows you to do things from a distance and with minimal effort. The technology is now standard in things like drones, which obviously cannot be flown any other way. However, remote control technology can also be used in creative ways to do everything from cutting your grass to flushing your toilet. In electronics, a remote control, also known as a remote or clicker, is an electronic device used to operate another device from a distance, usually wirelessly. In consumer electronics, a remote control can be used to operate devices such as a television set, DVD player or other digital home media appliance. A remote control can allow operation of devices that are out of convenient reach for direct operation of controls. They function best when used from a short distance. This is primarily a convenience feature for the user. In some cases, remote controls allow a person to operate a device that they otherwise would not be able to reach, as when a garage door opener is triggered from outside. Early television remote controls, 1956 to 1977, used ultrasonic tones. Present-day remote controls are commonly consumer infrared devices which send digitally coded pulses of infrared radiation. They control functions such as power, volume, channels, playback, track change, heat, fan speed, and various other features. Remote controls for these devices are usually small wireless handheld objects with an array of buttons. They are used to adjust various settings such as television channel, track number, and volume. The remote control code, and thus the required remote control device, is usually specific to a product line. However, there are universal remotes, which emulate the remote control made for most major brand devices. Remote controls in the 2000s include Bluetooth or Wi-Fi connectivity, motion sensor-enabled capabilities and voice control. Remote controls for 2010s onward smart TVs may feature a standalone keyboard on the rear side to facilitate typing, and be usable as a pointing device. The main technology used in home remote controls is infrared, IR, light. The signal between a remote control handset and the device it controls consists of pulses of infrared light, which is invisible to the human eye but can be seen through a digital camera, video camera, or phone camera. The transmitter in the remote control handset sends out a stream of pulses of infrared light when the user presses a button on the handset. A transmitter is often a light-emitting diode, LED, which is built into the pointing end of the remote control handset. The infrared light pulses form a pattern unique to that button. The receiver in the device recognizes the pattern and causes the device to respond accordingly. Most remote controls for electronic appliances use a near-infrared diode to emit a beam of light that reaches the device. A 940 nanometers wavelength LED is typical. This infrared light is not visible to the human eye but picked up by sensors on the receiving device. Video cameras see the diode as if it produces visible purple light. With a single channel, single function, one button, remote control, the presence of a carrier signal can be used to trigger a function. For multi-channel, normal multifunction, remote controls, more sophisticated procedures are necessary. One consists of modulating the carrier with signals of different frequencies. After the receiver demodulates the received signal, it applies the appropriate frequency filters to separate the respective signals. One can often hear the signals being modulated on the infrared carrier by operating a remote control in very close proximity to an AM radio not tuned to a station. Today, IR remote controls almost always use a pulse width modulated code, encoded and decoded by a digital computer. A command from a remote control consists of a short train of pulses of carrier present and carrier not present of varying widths. Radio remote control, RF remote control, is used to control distant objects using a variety of radio signals transmitted by the remote control device. As a complementary method to infrared remote controls, the radio remote control is used with electric garage door or gate openers, automatic barrier systems, burglar alarms and industrial automation systems. Standards used for RF remotes are Bluetooth AVRP, Zigbee, RF4CE, Z-Wave. Most remote controls use their own coding, transmitting from 8 to 100 or more pulses, fixed or rolling code, using OK or FSK modulation. Also, transmitters or receivers can be universal, meaning they are able to work with many different codings. In this case, the transmitter is normally called a universal remote control duplicator because it is able to copy existing remote controls, while the receiver is called a universal receiver because it works with almost any remote control in the market. A radio remote control system commonly has two parts, transmit and receive. The transmitter part is divided into two parts, the RF remote control and the transmitter module. This allows the transmitter module to be used as a component in a larger application. The transmitter module is small, but users must have detailed knowledge to use it. Combined with the RF remote control, it is much simpler to use. The receiver is generally one of two types, a super-regenerative receiver or a super-heterodyne. The super-regenerative receiver works like that of an intermittent oscillation detection circuit. The super-heterodyne works like the one in a radio receiver. The super-heterodyne receiver is used because of its stability, high sensitivity, and it has relatively good anti-interference ability, a small package and lower price. Today, all you need to do is push a button on the remote control to flip back and forth between hundreds of channels. In fact, many of the things you use every day can probably be controlled remotely. From garage door openers and toy cars to lights and stereo equipment, it's easier than ever to control things from a distance. How does all this remote control technology work? Is it magic? Nope. It's science applied to technology to make our lives easier and more convenient. Remote control has actually been around a long time. In both World War I and World War II, radio frequency devices were used to control boats and explosive devices remotely. Eventually, scientists would figure out how to incorporate that technology into all sorts of electronic devices. Today, remote control devices are usually based upon one of two main types of technology, infrared, IR, technology, or radio frequency, RF, technology. Let's look at how these types of technology help you control devices from afar. When it comes to televisions and home theater devices, the dominant technology tends to be infrared. An IR remote, also called a transmitter, uses light to carry signals from the remote to the device it controls. It emits pulses of invisible infrared light that correspond to specific binary codes. These codes represent commands, such as power on, volume up, or channel down. The controlled device, also called the receiver, decodes the infrared pulses of light into binary code that its internal microprocessor understands. Once the signal is decoded, the microprocessor executes the commands. IR remotes use LED lights to transmit their infrared signals. This results in a few limitations of the technology. Since light is used to transmit the signal, IR remotes require line of sight, which means you need an open path between the transmitter and receiver. This means that IR remotes won't work through walls or around corners. They also have a limited range of about 30 feet. Radio frequency remotes work in a similar way. Instead of using infrared light, though, they transmit binary codes to a receiver via radio waves. This gives RF remotes a much greater range than IR remotes. RF remotes can work at distances of 100 feet or more. This makes them useful in applications such as garage door openers and car alarms. You can also now find RF remotes being used with some modern satellite television systems. RF remotes aren't without their own issues, however. Although range is greatly improved compared to IR remotes, interference can be an issue for RF remotes due to the large number of radio waves all around us nearly all the time. For example, wireless internet and cell phones both use radio signals. To get around the issue of interference, many RF remotes only transmit at specific frequencies. They can also embed digital address codes in the radio signals to ensure that a receiver only responds to the correct radio signals. Have you ever tried using a remote control and stopped to wonder how that little device controls your gadget? Remotes have become a necessity in our daily lives, allowing us to control everything from our TVs to our air conditioners with the push of a button. Remote controls are handheld, small electronic devices you use to control gadgets from a distance. You can use remote controls to operate electronic devices like televisions, air conditioners, DVD players, audio/video recorders, radios, and other gadgets like car alarm FOBS and garage doors. Remote controls work with a receiver and transmitter. The receiver is within the device to be controlled, and the transmitter is in the remote control. As the names imply, the transmitter sends an encoded signal, which the receiver decodes and executes. A transmitter is made up of a set of buttons, an integrated circuit board, and batteries. Remote control buttons are usually made from rubber. The backside of each button has a thin conductive layer made from graphite. The conductive layer connects the buttons with the printed circuit board. You press the buttons to input commands. The circuit board, also called the printed circuit board, is the electronic part of the remote control. It is a circuit network that detects the buttons you press, processes the command, and translates the specific key into a unique signal sequence. It has a programmed integrated circuit, power supply connectors, transistors, and a transmitter module. The transistor amplifies the signals generated and sends the amplified signals to the transmitter module, which is usually at the end of the board. The transmitter module sends the signals as infrared light or radio frequencies picked up by the sensor within the receiver unit of your gadget. Remote controls are usually powered by one or two 1.5-volt batteries. The batteries provide the power the integrated circuit board needs to generate signals after you press the buttons. Capacitors help to draw energy from the batteries into the circuit. The circuit is completed when you press the buttons. There are two types of remote controls, infrared, IR, and radio frequency, RF, remote controls. IR remote controls use infrared light to transmit commands to the paired devices. You need to be in the line of sight of a device to use its IR remote control. These remote controls have IR LED transmitters at the end of the integrated board that transmits IR light impulses to the paired device. The IR light is simply specific binary codes generated when you press the buttons. The IR receiver in the targeted device picks up the IR light and decodes the command into binary data the microprocessor interprets. The microprocessor then executes the command. Advantages and disadvantages of IR remote controls. IR remote controls have some benefits and disadvantages. IR remotes are cheaper. They are more readily available. IR remotes provide more secure communication with the device via a line of sight or point-to-point mechanism. They use less power, so the batteries last longer. They are more stable over time. IR remote controls are difficult to intercept. They can't function effectively over long distances. These remotes require line-of-sight communication to function. They can't work well over hard objects, like walls, smoke, fog, and sunlight. RF remote controls use radio frequency waves to control devices. Usually, RF remote controls are used for distant objects like electric gate openers, drones, garage doors, burglar alarms, automatic barrier systems, and industrial automation systems. RF remote controls have RF transmitter modules that transmit the radio frequencies after generation from the integrated circuit. Advantages and disadvantages of RF remote controls. Here are some advantages and disadvantages of RF remote controls. RF remote controls can function well over long distances, up to 100 feet. These controls can function through walls and other physical obstacles. They don't require a line of sight. RF remote controls are more expensive than IR remotes. There may be radio frequency interference from other devices. Remotes offer you fingertip control and the ability to control several gadgets efficiently. With remote controls, you need not control an electronic device directly or climb up an air conditioner to adjust its temperature. Likewise, TV remote controls allow you to switch channels, adjust the volume, and execute other functions without visiting the television. To be turned on by a wireless remote, the controlled appliance must always be partly on, consuming standby power. A remote control is used for controlling substations, pump storage power stations and HVDC plants. For these systems, often PLC systems working in the long wave range are used. A subset of power line communication that sends remote control signals over energized AC power lines. This was used to remotely control home automation before the invention of Wi-Fi connected smart switches. Garage and gate remote controls are very common, especially in some countries such as the US, Australia, and the UK, where garage doors, gates, and barriers are widely used. Such a remote is very simple by design, usually only one button, and some with more buttons to control several gates from one control. Remote controls are used in photography, in particular to take long exposure shots. Many action cameras such as the GoPros as well as standard DSLRs including Sony's Alpha series incorporate Wi-Fi based remote control systems. These can often be accessed and even controlled via cell phones and other mobile devices. Video game consoles had not used wireless controllers until recently, mainly because of the difficulty involved in playing the game while keeping the infrared transmitter pointed at the console. Early wireless controllers were cumbersome and when powered on alkaline batteries, lasted only a few hours before they needed replacement. Thank you for watching this video.